you're surrogating intimacy for fantasy. And I was like, oh, wait. You know, when something just hits you like, oh shit.
Those urges there, like when I'm about to learn something that's going to help us grow. And I'm having to do the work as well, because I've got to read and I've got to listen, probably read the pages 4 or 5 times over to really understand it. So I've got to do the work here. Yeah, there's part of me that's saying, hey, don't do the fucking work. Just have a little scroll.
Hey, Pete.
Hey.
What's today's podcast on?
You tell me, mate. You've prepped this one. It sounds interesting.
So today's podcast is on why men need to quit porn. We're going to go through a number of sharings, not just on porn. Like, the title is to trigger you a little bit, because I can imagine if you've clicked on this because you have a socially acceptable porn addiction, you use porn as a crutch for your relationship issues, or if you've just straight up addicted to porn because it's what you've always watched. You might be single, you might be in a relationship. Porn is a pervasive habit. There's no two ways about it, right? And one of the things that I noticed is it's a very socially acceptable habit for men. And I didn't really even start to dig into this until I started The Awakened Man, with yourself and Yassine. And Yassine pointed out how much of an issue it was. Then every freaking guy I was speaking to, like numerous men, have you got a porn addiction? Yes, I watch it 3-5 times a week minimum. And I was like, right, it's more of an issue than I actually cared to acknowledge as a normal bloke, right? So I just think there needs to be a conversation about this. But what I want to do in today's podcast is we're going to tread the line of not just porn as an addiction, but it's like, why do guys have these numbing behaviors, these socially acceptable numbing behaviors that we use? And what is the impact of that? Like, Awakened Man is all about achieving the impossible, becoming the man you're capable of being. And this means letting go of some of these habits and behaviors and patterns that just aren't serving you and your relationship long term. So I'm excited to go through this, Pete. Yeah, before we get cracking, what's your insight? Or even just hearing that title, why men need to quit porn?
I think, well, one of my insights when you started talking there about just like social acceptance between groups of men. Yeah, absolutely. Like, especially in the younger days, like in teens and then 20s, groups of guys just bantering about porn, right? And it's like, it is absolutely socially acceptable and it's a laugh. And you get sent all these, the WhatsApp groups where it's all just like crude things being sent, and there's loads of it, and it is socially acceptable until someone tells you that it's not. And then, and absolutely similar sort of experience for me. Right, prior to The Awakened Man, no one had really said, hey, do you know what? That's a bit of a fucking problem. Like, that isn't normal for a man to, to go through and to watch and to do and so forth.
Yeah, and I didn't even say exactly the same for me. Like, group of mates, we used to pass around like a VCD before. You remember like video CDs before before we like had like the real digital age. And I was like, and it was just like, it was, oh yeah, have you seen this? Have you seen this? And it was funny. It was like, it was a kind of a way we used to connect, and it was a bit weird. We were all watching the same pornography, but it was a very shameful habit for me as well. It was something you did in closed doors. If you were in your family home, it's very embarrassing if you ever got caught by a family member. Got funny stories about that. But I think what happens is you're in that explorative phase as a teenager, and then naturally you men and meet partner and start to explore that arena, which is the sexual arena with your partner. And then it was something that Yassine said, I think it was in the first year of him running The Awakened Man, and he said, you're surrogating intimacy for fantasy. And I was like, wait, when something just hits you like, oh shit, oh no. And I was like, there's issues in my relationships like that I've had that I've not ever gone in and solved, had the hard conversations as we've talked about in the past. Because like, do you know what? I'll just go and watch pornography and I'll get my my fantasy experience through that. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a big place of work for me personally. And yeah, that was it. Like, that was the moment for me. I was like, oh yeah, shit, I really need to quit porn.
Yeah, when you when you were just saying about passing the CD around with all your mates, that brought back a memory of when my parents were together. So they divorced when I was 13, so I must have been like 11, 12 sort of age. Me and my mates, so we're young, like 11, 12, coming on 13, going in the woods. So I used to live opposite this woods, and there was hundreds and hundreds of acres of woods, right? We go searching for porn mags, because one day, like, I just found like a porn mag, right? It was just like right? We go searching for them, because back then porn mags were a thing, And
You were.
someone had obviously just like big black bags, stashed all their porn mags or thrown them away. Like, we used to go searching for them try and find these porn magazines. And
Yeah.
then, oh yeah, you have that one, I'll have this one.
Yeah.
But that's at that age. That's at like, just like as a very young boy, you're just like, things are starting to happen. We're starting to get these feelings about what's going on down there. And why do I look at that? And I feel pretty good when I look at that, right? So as
Yeah.
a really young boy, and then you get exposed to, back then it was porn magazines. Now it's just so accessible on your phone, and it's way more hardcore, literally,
Yeah. It
right?
is. It is. Yeah.
And so it just becomes a thing.
I never had that conversation with my dad. Like, my dad never sat me down as a young man and said, like, this is sex, this is how it all works. And one day I came in to my mum's house and my stepdad was sat there and there was a condom on the table. And I must have been 16 and I'd started having like sex at that point, quite late bloomer, like 16, 17, I think. And it was, that's a late bloomer, like an assumption there. I remember seeing the condom on the table and I was like, oh my God, we're about to have the conversation. See? And to be
Oh,
fair
so it
to
wasn't a
Jim,
used condom.
no, 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 no. It was just like one just like parked on the table because it was like Jim, my stepdad, saying, "Right, we're going to have this conversation because your mum wants me to have it with you." And he just had the conversation. He said, "Listen, if you're having sex, use a condom. Yeah, I assume you're having sex." And it was really, I remember it, just my face being so embarrassed. It was really awkward. But he, as a man, sat there and really kind of just took the way that he delivered that as a father figure. Like, I was very lucky to have that because my dad wasn't in the home, and it was always embarrassing. So I learned a lot of my first introduction to sex was pornography. But it's kind of this thing is that you have to kill the boy to become a man, and this is something I've learned again and again. So it's something I learned in the Awaken Man process is that you have to kill the boy-like behaviors in yourself to become the man that you want to be. And porn is one of those habits. It's a boy-like behavior. We were laughing before because when you're young, innocent, and you're looking for information and tutelage on that stuff, it's quite a cool, interesting way to go about it, find out really with your mates. But then it becomes a bit weird, and it becomes a bit like, and there's something that Terry Crews said, so Terry Crews is a big advocate for the no porn movement. Do you know the guy out White Chicks?
Yes.
Terry Crews. And he was there was an interview with him and I watched the interview and he said, you do realize half those young girls who are in porn movies have real trauma around sex and have real low self-esteem and some of them got real big issues with money and drugs. So you're basically masturbating to traumatized girls having got money issues and drug problems. And I was like, well, even if that's not true, which it could be, that's freaking hard to actually accept that. And then, so that even further entrenched my distaste for my behavior. And I was like, oh, that doesn't sit well with me, especially having two girls myself. I was like, two daughters. And I was like, yeah, that just, it's incongruent with who I want to be as a dad. And then I was like, oh God, so it's kind of like the final bastion. My final vice was like, oh, you know what? I don't take drugs. I'm not drinking. Okay, pornography. Oh, that's got to go too. And I was almost like, for me, it was like the death of porn was like, I had to have like a little funeral. Bye porn. It was, it was like, but it was like, I'm committed to this. And when I was having guys having that conversation with me saying, I've got a porn addiction, how could I coach them when I had the same problem? When I was frequently using it as a crutch, not, I don't think I had an addiction, but it was a frequent behavior for me, which I wanted to reduce and remove. So that was kind of like why it happened for me. And it's, I think I'm inviting the guys who are listening, if this is triggering you, this is good. Because you're likely, if you believe that, the contrary, you'll try and defend this reason. Now, this is the difference. And we had this conversation last year. There's a difference between watching porn and masturbating. Masturbating is healthy. Like learning to masturbate with your partner, over your partner, like thinking about your partner is healthy. It improves your relationship. But secretly, shamefully, going off to your room and watching a video that if you got caught watching, you'd be really deeply ashamed. That's an issue. That is a real
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah. I'm like, it's actually when we went to South Africa back end of last year and we were just having a discussion around the table. I don't know, you probably will remember this. And we were talking about like last moments, like we're just talking about the concept of living moment to moment to moment to moment, right? And like, because you could die at any moment, right? And just to say you had that porn addiction, right? And you die in the moment where you got your dick in your hand and you're jerking off to whatever you're looking at, right? And that's your moment.
Yeah.
And that's like, oh, Well, wouldn't want that to
Yeah,
happen.
yeah, and then you haven't had enough time to clear your search history, gents. Imagine that. Yeah, and that was it. You know, these things, these conversations, where a lot of guys won't go. These were coming up for me last couple of years. You know, and I was like, it started to get front and center. And actually, then I started to look into my relationship, and I was like, oh shit, there's some things that me and Poppy need to work on, and we're still working on. You know, I always, you know, open, like we say this on the podcast all the time. There's work to do in my relationship. And because I want to have a really, really integrated, strong, long lasting relationship. And if I've got a crutch where every time that we're not having sex because we haven't dealt with some issues, or I'm not being romantic, or there's not real trust in the relationship, or I'm not showing up as the man, that we don't have sex, then I've got this kind of crutch that I'm using to mask that. It's gonna prolong that issue. So one thing that quitting porn has done for me is that I really am aware of when we're not having sex. And it means that I need to go in and do the work on my relationship. And it's hard. It's not easy. And I can say that from being in the trenches doing this work with you guys who are listening in. So that's the kind of the pornography thing. Like, you might be able to listen to this and you might be like, oh, do you know what? I don't watch porn. I don't have a porn addiction. You could literally change the word porn for alcohol, drugs, scrolling, sugar. Okay. Generally, it's exactly the same behavior. There's an opportunity for you to grow, to push into something uncomfortable, and then you find yourself doing that, performing that vice. It could be you're drinking at the end of the day. It could be that you want to go and meet someone. You're about to go on a date and you have to, have a drink beforehand. It could be that you are numbing with sugar every time you're experiencing pain and discomfort. And pain and discomfort are associated with growth. And so this is why it's such an important habit, is that our program is to help men grow exponentially over 12 months and then their life. So they've got to get very, very good at dealing with pain and discomfort. Now, what we want to help them do is start to use things like tools, like psychological tools, the power of a group of men, to stop numbing with things like porn, alcohol, drugs, sugar, scrolling, these behaviors that keep them stuck in what I would call like boydom or guidom. Yeah. And that was something that has become more and more prevalent for me, as even with After Men's Business, I did my talk on this, where actually it was I was like, I talked about masturbating, I talked about jerking off so much in my talk, apparently, that I've now become this kind of, I've got a problem. But
A wanking
I
problem.
actually, yeah, I've got a wanking problem, but I actually haven't. I shouldn't even defend that because it doesn't. Yeah, I should just let it go and let. But
He's
what I
biting.
was looking, yeah, I'm not biting because I know, because if I do, it's going to get worse. But it was about impulses. It was about that you, as a man, I can guarantee that you are acting upon some kind of impulse that is fucking your life up in some way. Yeah, I can guarantee that, because I know that, because I have impulses and I act upon them, and when I do, I have shame afterwards. And Pete probably has the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know what yours is like. What's yours like? Have you got advice?
Recently, food, and which is, I say, odd for me because I've been, pretty healthy and healthy for a very, very long time. But just like the overindulgent of a bit more chocolate, I'll just have a little bit. I'll have a little bit more. Oh, fuck it. Do you know what? I'll keep going. I'll have a little bit more. And just that started off like once a week, twice a week. Now it's just like daily. And yeah, so that there is definitely, it's the sugary part, right? It's not bad, but it's not like where I want it to be. It's all where it should be for the level that I hold myself to.
Yeah, and that's it, right? And Pete sharing that is probably exactly the man we're speaking to. Is that a lot of you guys, you might not have a chronic like porn addiction. You might not actually do cocaine every single day or every single weekend, but you've just got these little habits that creep in that just make you like 90% there instead of 110%. And I think that's the difference, right? Like, they're the kind of guys we work with best. Yeah, it's like got their shit together. They haven't got some real big issues, but just where it's a little bit out of kilter. We do actually have guys who've got addictions in the program, but they seek outside help. Yeah, so we're not claiming to be kind of your AA or your Drug Addicts Anonymous, all that sort of stuff. We're saying like, hey, there's a couple of things that's out of kilter, and we just need to get them back in check. So first of all, like, how do we go about really getting this under control? Well, the how is just the just for today mindset. So the Awaken 8 program, if a guy's on there and he's committed to quitting porn, the only thing he needs to do is quit porn for today. And I love it kind of like sandwiches between what Steve Chandler says, just for today, right now, and the Jeff Bezos mindset is day zero. So every single day is day zero. So you're not actually doing 8 weeks of no porn. You're doing, what is it? How many? 7 times 8. Can't do that quickly. how many days of just saying that, just for today, I'm not going to watch pornography. I'm not going to indulge in alcohol just for today. And that's the first commitment we make over anything else. So if I'm going out with my mates, I've already made that commitment that just for today, I'm not drinking. So I'm going to find a new way to challenge myself, a new way to push myself to socialize without alcohol. And this is what a lot of guys have, is like they have a conditional mindset. Yeah, it's like, oh, but this, what a commitment is, it makes it non-negotiable. And so that's what I feel doing this as a group of guys. And I've got here, we've got the document here. A Stanford researcher and 2 collaborators conducted an extensive review of Alcoholics Anonymous studies and found the fellowship helps more people achieve sobriety than therapy does. This demonstrates how powerful quitting something in plain sight with the support of a brotherhood is. So that was off the Stanford medical website, and it was really good. It's like, oh yeah, the support of a brotherhood whilst you're quitting something in plain sight. Now that was in the actual document. It's like, it's out in the front, front and center. Like Alcohol Anonymous, it's an anonymous thing. You go there anonymously in the space which is held. People are openly talking about something they're quitting or getting rid of. So that's what we're going to invite into the Awaken 8. You're going to quit something in public.
Yeah, I like it. I absolutely see the power of that. I see all the guys doing super well in the group because there's a group of guys. So, and everyone supports each other and there's that level of accountability.
Yeah. The thing is like, oh, I've got this shameful habit. I've been doing this, and everyone just goes, yeah, okay, fine.
Yeah. There's no there's no judgment around that.
Yeah, no problem. And I don't think of you any differently. It's just a thing. There's no, I don't think of you any less as a man. You've got a behavior, you've got a pattern that you need to get in check. So I think that's really helpful to have that support. And when you know that someone else is doing it, and I think there's so much power in that. The final thing I want to speak on today is what will happen when you give up these vices. So when you have these vices, you're going to get real up close and personal with something called Part X. And we are going to do, or I'm going to definitely do a whole session on Part X, because I've learned so much about Part X from my mentor, Kristen and Barry, right? Part X is this part of us which is there to X out our potential. In moments where we are going to expand, we're going to grow, we're going to push into discomfort and grow, it's there to shut us down. Now, Part X, our part of us that is designed to keep us small, keep us safe, keep us unseen, uses things like impulses to control us. So we're being controlled and kept small by our impulses. Now, if you think about this makes so much sense when you look at this. And I didn't even really understand Part X. I thought it was just a story. I thought it was these 2 clever psychologists that had made up this story. But when they explained it like this, it made lots of sense. So you've got almost like spiritual physics. Yeah, so it's Newton's 3rd law. Every force has an equal and opposing force. So your force to desire to want to grow and build your life is met with an equal and opposing force, which is Part X. Right? So if you want to grow your life this year, you need to be very good at reducing that force, which is getting in your way, which is your Part X, to help you move forwards and grow. And I was like, that makes so much sense, because that is, it's a spiritual physics. And I was like, makes sense. Right. Okay. So what this means is that you get really, really clear on as soon as about to take a risk, this part of me shows up and I want to go and watch porn. I want to go and scroll. I want to go and distract myself from the pain that I'm about to face. Yeah. Is this making sense?
That makes so much frigging sense. Yeah. I love that. I hadn't heard the Newton part before with the opposing forces. I mean, I heard about the opposing forces, but not in just the respect of how that affects us and how Part X is the opposing force. I could literally, like this morning, I was reading a new book. Oh, it's on my desk over there. It's only a short book, and I was excited to read it. And I got like a few pages in, and then I just had this fucking urge just to pick up my phone and scroll. The book is good, right? And I can see how I can apply these things into our business. Yet I had this urge to just pick my phone up and scroll. And I picked it up as well. And I opened Facebook, and I was like, oh, here I am, caught myself and managed to put it down. But I can see that those urges there, like when I'm about to learn something that's going to help us grow. And I'm having to do the work as well, because I've got to read, and I've got to listen, probably read the pages 4 or 5 times over to really understand it. So I've got to do the work here. Yeah, there's there's part of me that's saying, hey, don't do the fucking work. Just have a little scroll, right?
Yeah.
Because it's easy. That's
Yeah.
that's like a really tiny thing, just reading a book, right? But you can just apply that on every level.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, also you're a very good implementer of like, so one of Pete's master skills is he'll read something and go and implement it. So maybe your part X kind of knows that.
Yeah.
So here's some scrolling, here's some scrolling. You turn
Don't
around.
implement. Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, Pete's a dad, right? I know his morning routine, he reads a book on the couch. There's a limited time before Leo wakes up. And if you lose that moment, you've lost it for the
I
day.
know. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So I was reading my book, and what time was this? It was 6. Oh, I started reading at 6 in the morning. He started like crying. I could hear him at like 6:30, and I'm like, oh no. I was expecting another 15 minutes here. So absolutely. And if I'd used that time to scroll, I'd have lost my window.
Yeah. So see how this is it's so nuanced, and like even high performers will struggle with this. It's like you will do something, you'll check stats. Frank Kern talked about this, right? So I went to Frank Kern's mastermind and he talked about this. He checks stats. That was his habit. He was like, oh, check stats, check. He was laughing about it on stage, but he was dealing with it very publicly. He's like, hi, I'm Frank Kern. I've got addiction to checking stats. Who else is here to check stats after every single email? Send an email, check stats. Do a little bit of that, check stats. And he said, like, he just talked about that. So it could be something that's like a behavior that seems like not too unhealthy, but you can still use that time more wisely. Okay, so here's how 3 most common ways Part X shows up. And this is something that I wanted to share with you, like really importantly, if you're going to be, especially quitting numbing behaviors, right? So you get a relentless negative voice. So part of the reason we numb is because we have this relentless negative voice that pervades our life. So we then numb with an action like porn, drugs, alcohol. Now, if you think about this, all the way through the week, if we've chosen comfort over growth, we're going to get a really loud voice on a Friday. Why do most people get a shit faced on a Friday? They feel like they haven't done enough all week. Don't feel good about themselves. It's another week they've wasted, right? And I think there's something about that on the weekend, right? The second way that Part X shows up is a powerful primitive feeling or an impulse. So that's like, I really need to go and jerk off. That's a primitive, it's a primitive feeling. So is anger and rage, a very primal feeling for a man. And they need to get rid of that. I'm thinking about sex. I'm thinking about women, thinking about doing something, something like where I'm going to assert my own force and power because they don't feel powerful. Yeah. So a powerful primitive feelings. That could also be hunger. And the final one is a narrative that you've been victimized. Oh, poor me. This is hard. I deserve this drink. That could be one for you as well. And you're going to be faced with those 3 ways that it shows up when you go through this process of giving them up. But you just got to be able to say, hey, that's a part of me that's trying to dim my potential. It's trying to shut me down. And I'm going to I'm going to get front and center with this. I'm going to deal with this by taking the hard action that I know I need to go and take. So like, that's my, in terms of like what I've tried to do today, guys, is just give you an insight to one of the steps on the Awakened 8 and equally champion this idea that giving up pornography is something that you should consider or at least reduce. And it's not easy. It's not socially acceptable. I've had guys just judge me and say, oh yeah, you'll be giving up, breathing next and all sorts of stuff. When I've said to my friends like, oh God, Ben, you give up everything. But I feel better than ever. I feel much better than ever. I'm happier. My relationship is improving and it's an arena that I really want to get better at. And I think there's levels to this. So I really wanted to share that with you today and invite you to join me and Pete and a load of other guys. All of our guys in the tribe are doing this. And this is free. It's a free opportunity to get around high performing men that are doing these habits.
Yeah, it's a challenge, a free challenge.
Yeah, free challenge. Nothing's for sale. It's just an opportunity to get around guys, meet a few guys that are actually into these kind of things where, self-betterment. There's going to be like other things we've talked about on a previous podcast. If you're interested in joining the challenge for 8 weeks, I feel it's going to improve your life, your relationship, all you need to do is head on over to menspod.com. Even if you just decide not to commit fully to all of the habits, you're going to get a lot of value from being on that workshop anyway. So come on, join us.
Cool. Cheers, guys.
Cheers for listening, guys. Take care.